On the last episode of Hops and Gnarly Brewing, I made 2 batches of a Hazy IPA with 2 different water profiles, one high in sulfate and one high in chloride. The biggest difference between the two was the sharpness of the hops, and I really liked the rounder hop flavors of batch B, which was made with a high chloride water profile. Today, I'm shifting my attention to the grain bill, or more specifically, the oats. Oats are commonly used in New England IPAs to provide a thick, fluffy mouthfeel. So far in this series, I've been using malted oats from Proximity Malt, mostly because I was excited to try it out. But in the past, I've relied mostly on flaked oats. Just as before, my goal is not necessarily to decide a winner. I just want to taste the differences for myself and hopefully over time get familiar with the things that separate good beers from great beers. Now, let's make some beer. For this beer, I'm using some local spring water and I'm adjusting the water profile using gypsum, calcium chloride, Epsom salt, and canning salt. I'm going to match the water profile to batch B, which was a New England IPA water profile with 100 parts per million sulfate and 200 parts per million chloride. For the grain bill, I'm using locally malted grains from Proximity Malt. I've got 58% base 2-row, 13.5% white wheat, and 5% dextrin. And instead of the malted oats I used before, I'm using an equal amount of flaked oats. Then, at the end, we'll be able to compare 2 versions of the same beer, one made with malted oats and the other one made with flaked oats. Let's get it going. I'll keep mashing this in until everything is nice and saturated and holding steady at our target mash temperature of 152 Fahrenheit or 67 Celsius. Then I'll start a timer for 1 hour. In the meantime, I'm cleaning out my new malt cart. Milling your own grain at home is great, but super dusty. So having wheels on this thing means I can do this. Up top, I have the 3-roller malt muncher from Kegland, and for now, I'm using the included hand crank, which honestly has been kind of fun to use. To keep the dust contained, I made a wood funnel and cut notches in the corners for a dust sleeve that Meg made for me. To the right of the mill is my Anvil grain scale, which sits on top of a little piece of plywood. Then, the bottom half of the malt cart is dedicated to grain storage. I have 6 malts on hand at the moment, but I'll continue to add more as I need them. Okay, we've been mashing this porridge for an hour now and it's time to mash out. I'm moving the temperature up to 168 and I'll hold it there for about 10 minutes. Alright, time to yank these grains and get our boil started. With the basket up and out of the wort, I'm cranking this Anvil Foundry to full blast. Once we're up to temp, I'll start a timer for a quick 30-minute boil. Alright, we've got 15 minutes left in the boil and it's time to start sanitizing the chiller. Okay, time for some hops. I'm dropping the temperature to 160 Fahrenheit or 71 Celsius and it's time to kick off the whirlpool. For this 2.5 gallon batch, I'm adding 7 grams of Citra and our 30-minute whirlpool timer starts now. It's been 20 minutes and it's time for the next hop addition. Here's 10 more grams of Citra and 10 grams of Eldorado. We've got 10 minutes to go. And just like that, it's time to chill this wort down and get ready for fermentation. As we get close to pitching temperature, I'm using an inline diffusion stone from Blickman Engineering to oxygenate the wort. Let me get this thing transferred and we'll get set up for fermentation. For this beer, I'm using a similar setup on the Anvil bucket fermenter, but I forgot the butterfly valve, so my typical dry hopping routine probably won't be possible. For yeast, I'm going with Imperial Flagship and a fermentation temperature of 65 degrees Fahrenheit or about 18 degrees Celsius. This strain is a beast. It's pretty clean and it leaves the right amount of sweetness and haze. The next morning when I checked in on the beer, it was already bubbling happily and it didn't slow down for the next 3 days. On day 4, things had mellowed out, so I bumped the temperature up a few degrees to clean up any off flavors and make sure the yeast was done eating. It's been a couple days since then and we've landed at a final gravity of 1015. Time for some dry hops. I've got an ounce of Citra and an ounce of Eldorado. Since we're at the end of fermentation, it's very important to avoid as much oxygen as possible. Because I forgot the butterfly valve, my plan is just to do this as quickly as possible. Honestly, that wasn't too bad. 2 days later, I cold crashed, then I kegged it, carbed it, and now I'm ready to package it up with the October SL1. This is a can seamer made specifically for homebrewers, and while mine is set up to run 16-ounce cans at the moment, it also comes standard with a 12-ounce adapter. All you have to do is pop a can into the seamer, lift it into place, spin it, and seam it. Push the lever to the right and then push it to the left. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be surprised how quickly you can run a full batch. Alright, everything is packaged up and we're ready to taste. On the left, we have batch B, which was made with malted oats. And on the right, we have batch C, made with flaked oats. Visually, these beers are almost identical. They're straw yellow with a nice white head, and it seems like maybe batch C has slightly more haze, which I would attribute to the age difference of the beers more than the type of oats used. Batch B aroma hasn't changed a whole lot. It smells citrusy with a little bit of vanilla towards the end. It tastes nice and fluffy with a decent amount of tropical fruit and citrus. And batch C smells pretty much the same but a little greener. It tastes nice and fresh with the same level of tropical fruit and citrus, but it's a little chewy. It kind of reminds me of those super thick smoothie sours. But I wonder if a blend could work. One of the best things about using malted oats is the husk can take the place of most, if not all, of the rice hulls. The flaked oats, on the other hand, get all gunky in the mash, but they really have an impact on the body. I think this blend is the way to go. It's super fluffy, but not quite chewy, and should be easier to manage in the mash. And as I've sort of lived with these beers over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about doing something similar with the water profile and maybe changing up the grain bill slightly. More to come. This episode of Hops and Gnarly Brewing was made possible by these awesome partners. In the next episode, we're moving on to the hops, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll see you again soon.